meeting and conference room, and so trying to get all the bugs worked out. So I appreciate everyone's patience, both in-house here and online. So thank you guys. It is now 6:08. We already called the meeting to order for the August 18th Redevelopment Commission meeting. If staff would please do the roll call.
Chairman Shaka,
Present.
Commissioner Bigelow,
Present.
Commissioner Kendall,
Here.
Commissioner Meehan,
Present.
and Commissioner Clausen.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, members of the public may comment on matters not on the agenda. The commission's response is limited to responding to criticism, asking staff to review a matter commented upon, or asking that a matter be put on a future agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to address the commission at this time?
Mr. Chairman, we have one request for communications from citizens for Dorlise Machado Liddell. So we'll have her come on down.
Good evening, Commissioner.
Test. Test.
Step stool. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dorlise Machado Liddell. I'm a Gilbert resident and I reside in the Heritage District. I just want a few points that I'd like to make regarding the study session that's coming up. I think that a study session regarding design guidelines, I think it's the park. The conditional use permit is going second, and the conditional use permit hasn't even been approved. So I do think, in the benefit for the public, that the study session should happen after the conditional use permit is approved, because you're talking about something that hasn't even been approved. So I would hope that, in taking that in consideration, that when you're doing the study sessions, that it's actually on something that has been approved, because it does affect how the placement of items are based on, hopefully, public input. Secondly, I'd like to address this place. It's called Shady Park. It's in Tempe. And Shady Park is kind of a venue. It's an outdoor venue. It's like a bar, I guess, and they have outdoor bands and entertainment. They have it in Tempe. Well, it was built, and then they built this complex, the ASU complex, which people live there, and they say seniors, but I don't think it's just seniors. And there have been multiple complaints, because in December, before COVID, that they were living there, they didn't have any noise issues. But when Shady Park started up again and all the entertainment was going, they started to have issues. That's in Tempe. That's current. I asked the commission to look at things and have a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach to noise. And when we look at noise, to look at the whole district as a whole at build out. We have hotels, we have residential areas, we have loft living. So we really have to be mindful of the decisions that we make now that will affect the future of the Heritage District. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Are there any people from the public that want to make a comment this time?
Mr. Chairman, I have no other requests for communications from citizens.
Perfect. Thank you. So at this time, we're going to move into the administrative item number 1, and that is we need to consider approval of the minutes for the regular meeting held on July 21st, 2021. Are there any edits to the commission that the commission wishes to make? If not, we're looking for a motion for the Redevelopment Commission meeting minutes for July 21st, 2021.
I approve the meeting minutes for July 21st, 2021.
I second.
So at this time, we have a motion made by Commissioner Bigelow, and we have a second by Commissioner Kendall. At this time, I will do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bigelow, how do you vote? In favor? Yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Kendall, do you vote in favor of the approval of the minutes?
Yes.
And then Commissioner Clausen online, do you approve of the minutes?
Yes.
And Commissioner Meehan, how do you vote? Yes or no?
Yes.
Approval? Perfect. I also vote in approval of the minutes, so the motion does carry forward. Thank you, guys. We look forward now to the discussion of item DR 21-87. And for the benefit of our new commissioner online, study sessions are meant for the opportunity for commissioners to ask questions and provide feedback. So tonight, we're not going to make a motion for approval, just feedback and comments or questions. At this time, the staff, it's your opportunity to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Sydney Bethel. Tonight we're presenting DR 21-87, the park. So this is for study session for input only, and you will be hearing the conditional use permit on the formal hearing for recommendation. We just can't get past IT issues tonight. Sorry. Stand by. Jocelyn, could you do next slide, please? So the subject site is a presently vacant lot. It's approximately 2.7 net acres. So it's located in the vacant lot right in between Hearn Way and Brycomp, bounded by the existing Gilbert parking garage, along with OSO, the Barlow office property, as well as Culinary Dropout. Jocelyn, next slide, please. So the request before you tonight is for the design review to provide input only. So this is going to include site plan, landscaping, grading and drainage, elevations, floor plans, etc. So there are two additional cases that are under review for this project at the same time. The first being the conditional use permit to allow the use for the site, which is entertainment and recreation outdoor. The second being an administrative use permit that is being reviewed by staff to allow off-site parking in the Heritage District. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. So tonight, requesting for input, as I said. So I'll go through the slides and kind of talk you through what staff is looking for. But overall, we're looking for general site design comments, input regarding a request for a single-story development in the Heritage District, input on the elevations, colors and materials, and consistency with the design guidelines, and also input on the plant materials and their consistency with the design guidelines in the plant palette. Jocelyn, next slide, please. So this site is proposed to be part of a master site plan with the existing OSO development. So it's called Gilbert Shops on here. It includes OSO, the creamery, as well as the dog spa. So this project is in collaboration with OSO. So it will be maintained, operated, and built by OSO as an extension of their development. Next slide, Jocelyn. So this is the site plan. This is zooming into the actual site itself. As you can see, there's 3 points of access for the site, and they are pedestrian only. There is no vehicular access for the site. There are going to be some bicycle parking provided on the site at the entrance, 24 spaces, but all the parking, as I said previously, will be accommodated off-site throughout the district within 1,000 feet of the area. There are 3 separate buildings or modules on this site. One being the retail modules located along Hearn Way, which will have 3 separate retail establishments in there. Along Brycomp Boulevard, there is the entertainment area or stage, which is facing inward to the site. And then in the central part of the site, you're going to see that concession stand. So that will be concessions and drinks, which will be operated by OSO. So all of the operations details I have provided in the staff report to provide some insight into the site since it is a little unique. They are proposing to make this a temporary development, looking to have it for 1 to 2 years operating while they wait for a more permanent project to come in. So keep that in mind as we are going through and you are providing feedback. So we do not have any provisions in our land development code to allow temporary commercial developments. So that is why it is going through the formal process of design review and the use permit and such. Jocelyn, next slide, please. I'm just showing the landscape plan here. So there is not going to be a large amount of landscape planting on the site, but there will be grass throughout the whole center of the site. So that is the big draw of it, is that it's a park-like setting, and they will provide benches throughout, picnic tables, small games, and those types of items. Along Brycomp Boulevard and Hearn Way, you will see that's where a majority of the planting is. So this is either plant materials that are complementary or similar to existing plant materials that were put in the recent CIP project in that right of way. Staff is just requesting input on 2 plants that are not included in the Heritage District Design Guidelines approved plant palette. They are red yucca and Outback Sunrise. So these are 2 plants that are a deviation from the approved plant palette. So it is something that the commission can allow as accent materials, or we can request that they follow the design guidelines. Jocelyn, next slide, please. So here are the elevations. I know this is a little chaotic, but they are smaller singular buildings. So they are steel modules that will be built and then brought in and placed in site, and they are customized. So the applicant during first review received feedback by staff to bring the product more into more aligned with the design guidelines through colors and materials and articulation. So they came back with this new design here and added additional wood to the facade of the building frontages that are fronting both Brycomp and Hearn Way. So you can see there, we have the entry feature that has a displayed the park sign on there, along with the retail modules, also have the wood facade. So staff is just requesting input on the overall design and consistency with the design guidelines. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. So the applicant has provided some renderings to give you a better understanding of what the site will look and feel like as it moves forward. So as you can see here, this is an overall view looking from the parking garage. So you can see that park entry feature along with the planters that then eventually connects to a 4-foot fence. So they will be closing this at night and locking up, again, maintained by OSO for that. Next slide, please, Jocelyn. They also provided some depictions of the individual features, such as the internal area. As you can see, there's the cornhole and some of the benches, along with some entry as well. Next slide, Jocelyn. So the art shown on the entertainment wall is just for reference only. So we do not have purview over the art that goes there, but they are proposing to do a mural along that wall piece that is right behind the entertainment module, and just some additional photos for you. And then next slide, Jocelyn. We just have one more where they just showed you what the retail component would look like on Hearn Way. The cool part about the retail is not only can you utilize it from inside the site, but vendors will also be able to enter it from Hearn Way, providing some on-site retail opportunities. Next slide, Jocelyn. And here's just a closer look at the color materials. Next slide. Oh no, you're good. Next slide. Sorry, I'm just staring at her. Yeah. So here's the lighting. So it is a little bit of unique lighting. They are using festival lights in order to meet our lighting code and to provide some protection with that light spillage into the existing right-of-way. You can see a small detail has been provided in that bottom right corner that shows that there are shielding functions on top of there to make sure the light projects downwards, opposed to all around like you see in traditional festival or bistro lights. So this is in order to allow them to comply with our lighting code in the municipal code, and then also to protect the existing lighting that is along Hearn Way, our festival lights that are there. Next slide, Jocelyn. So again, I just put up there what staff is looking for requested input, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney. At this time, I will ask the other commissioners for any questions or just general comments for staff, and then I'll go to the public. So this time, are there any commissioners that want to ask any questions? And as a preface to any questions, we are not the Planning and Zoning Commission. Our job here is to look at design and use of property and setback and landscape and colors and that kind of thing. So while we might have questions personally regarding noise and use, I think we're here just to look at the purpose of the property being used in a certain way. So just that was a kind of reminder. You're still welcome to ask those questions, but I don't think that's on our jurisdiction really to make a decision on. So with that, I'll be looking for comments from other commissioners.
Chair Shaka, I have a question. So for the retail opportunities, how are the vendors driving up to stock those places? Like, what's that connection point? What's that drive aisle?
Commissioner Meehan, so I do not know the answer to that question. So the architect is here, so I can ask him to bring that answer back to you when we talk about the conditional use permit. At this time, I do not know where their designated location would be. I would assume it would be the same as where OSO drops off. So OSO does drop off at the next street over in front of their property along the main right of way. So that's where they currently do a lot of their loading and unloading. Culinary Dropout also does their loading and unloading adjacent to the parking garage located on, if you look on the north side, there's a small pocket where the trash compactors are behind the building. So that's where they do there. So I'd assume it'd be one of those same locations, but I can provide a confirmation for you when we talk about the use permit.
So I'll go up. I got a few quick ones. Just curious on the grass. Are you guys thinking real grass with sprinklers and everything, or turf?
It is Bermuda, I believe.
Bermuda.
So,
Okay.
real grass.
Real grass. Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. That'll be great. Just because it's so hot during the summer. And then just so I understand correctly, OSO obviously is going to run and operate this. I read in the packet that they're going to be, access to their restrooms and everything inside the restaurant. So that's all taken care of. And then they're going to be leasing out this to tenants, whoever want to have the space to do retail. And then they're going to be selling drinks and different things in that same area. Is that kind of the feel for it, or?
Commissioner Bigelow, yeah, for the drink and food portion, that will be directly operated by OSA, but the retail, it's my understanding, is that they will be contracting out independent vendors to come in and rotating them kind of in a pop-up type scenario.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
Mhm.
cool. And then my last question is I know they're working on a more permanent site or situation, but what it evolves into, is it going to be something similar to the same concept, just a little bit more permanent, or is it completely different?
Commissioner Bigelow, currently they have no plans for the permanent development. So there's a different property owner than OSO that owns this site. So to my knowledge, there are no plans in the work, but they will be signing an independent contract with that property owner, and they may know more about the future
Okay.
uses that are kind of proposed on there. But right now, there are none proposed that I know of.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a few questions. You mentioned that, and actually Commissioner Bigelow just mentioned, after 2 years, there's no real plan beyond that?
Commissioner Kendall, right now, this is just what's being brought forward. So the 1 to 2 years was a number that was provided by the applicant in their narrative. So that's what we are going off of. Since there is no definition in our code for a temporary commercial use or regulations for it, we don't have a time period for it. So technically, this will be approved for the length of the lot for this development.
Well,
So I think as we're going to have a second in a minute here for public comment. So as a public comment, I will be able to bring you up to the podium for public comment in a moment.
Chair Shaka, for study session, the public is not supposed to comment on the items. That is the applicant over there, Bob from 61st Architectures. For the conditional use permit, we can bring him up and allow him to answer the questions, and I'll look to Amanda, but I do not believe that they'd be allowed to come up at this time,
Perfect.
unfortunately.
Understood. Thank you.
May I continue? Will there be an element of shade to protect from the elements of sun and to protect the grass? And then what about like fans and mist and those types of things?
Commissioner Kendall, so right now, my understanding is that there are some awnings that are proposed attached to some of the buildings that you can see in the elevations, and they are proposing some movable type of shade features. I do not know about the misting in all of those items if those are included, but that could be a possibility.
Will there be food prepared at the actual site, or will it be prepackaged food?
Commissioner Kendall, it will be prepackaged food.
Who will be responsible for security and maintenance and safety?
OSO has stated that they will be in charge of security and use their security team that they use at their current facility along with their same maintenance team.
Alcohol permitted there?
Alcohol would be permitted if they apply for the proper permit, so they can do an extension of premise from OSO or apply for a alcohol license. So currently, not right now, but that is something they definitely could apply for, and it seems to be an intent.
And then you mentioned the plants and trees. Who would be responsible for maintenance and taking care of those?
The property owner would be responsible for maintenance.
That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Do we have
Sure.
any questions or comments online? Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, Chair Chaka, I think I've got two. Can we confirm what are the sizes of each retail module that are proposed? The square footages of each retail module.
Sorry, I'm trying to do the math in my head and I'm blanking. It's 480 square feet combined.
Okay. Combined, so total among the okay.
Among all three, correct.
Among all three, gotcha. And then I'm assuming these modules are similar. So second question, I'm assuming these modules are similar to what, for example, the Churchill did in downtown Phoenix. They're a modified shipping container, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, the Churchill can be a similar comparable type use.
Yep. And then is it the applicant's intent to paint those modules or allow them to like naturally oxidize? I think they did that at the Churchill. They kind of let them naturally oxidize over time. Was the applicant looking at painting them a specific color to prevent that oxidization, or do they want them to naturally oxidize?
They're painting them a warm brown called Sedona at Sunset with an accent of orange. So they are planning to paint them.
Okay.
Any other questions? I had a couple comments. I think there's it looks great. I just looking at the visual. It's not built yet, but there's a great sense of arrival if you're in the garage and you're looking at this, and it looks very inviting. Like Commissioner Clausen mentioned, the Churchill in Phoenix, you can't really get into it after hours. And so I was just wondering if the security or the way the landscape buffers are, is it adequate for after hours if people could not trespass into this property, if it's secure enough? There's a question like that. Also in Phoenix, Pemberton, downtown Chandler has one similar. So I didn't know if the security was adequate the way it's designed. There's a question about that. Another question has to do with, it might not be in our jurisdiction as far as the use, but as far as occupancy, how many people can be here on a special event? You know, is there a limit on the number of people that can be here? And with that, and going back to Commissioner Bigelow's question about restrooms, we have exceptions for parking and exceptions for a lot of things when we're looking at downtowns. And so you don't have to park your patrons and your trash is off-site. But when it comes to restrooms and serving alcohol, and if they do get that permitted or they don't get that permitted, is there adequate restrooms inside OSO for the use of a half acre, of less than a half acre? So it's a question, about the look and feel. Is it safe? And not to spend anyone's money, but is there any requirement for additional facilities, even hand washing stations and such? Other than that, I think it's great. The name could be confusing for the public. I'm a huge fan of cool names, but Shady Park and Tempe never lets me to believe that it's publicly owned, and I think some people might be confused. I think when it's built, it'd be nice if it was the park by OSO or whatever. It's fine. But that was just a side note, nothing to do with it's fine. It just was as a comment. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Chair Shocker, regarding your first comment, so they are providing a 4-foot security wall around the site, and then also the planters will equate to around that same height. So they will also lock it up at night. So 4 feet, technically, people could hop that if they would like to, but this has been reviewed through our PD department as well, who also made some comments regarding this, and they were comfortable with what was being proposed, along with the fact that OSO will be providing that security element to that. Regarding your second question, with the restrooms.
Yeah, the
Yes.
number of people, occupants.
In occupancy. So I do not know the occupancy level. So that's something that we can inquire about and bring back to you next time and get that number from our building and fire division. But in regards to restrooms, that is something that has been reviewed by our fire and building reviewer during this process. And due to their internal access into OSO and the amount of people for the calculations for that and for OSO and their amount of stalls in those items. I don't know the exact calculations. They do meet all the requirements, and that's something they've worked very closely to make sure that they're aligned with all of the fire safety and building safety requirements, including being sprinklered in those items as well.
Perfect. Like the front of Postino or the front of, say, the porch might have a 4-foot fence, and so people could hop those, but it's not going to be very inviting after hours when they're closed. And so this could be very inviting. I don't know, on the backside of Joe's Real Barbecue what that fencing looks like, but 4 feet doesn't seem to be a deterrent for some people. That's all. And maybe there's some other landscaping opportunities where there's something that could be more of a deterrent, but that's a staff question. And but it might be a future, maybe 6 months from now, if they want to add landscape, they come back to you, back to us, or is it something they do because there's a need? They want to add landscape for either aesthetics or they want to add landscape for security. Is that something you guys can handle on a staff level?
Chair Shaka, yes, they could just come through, and if they want to change out their landscaping, do an administrative amendment to change out their palette. So that's something they definitely could do.
Perfect. Are there any more questions? Sometimes questions arise from questions. Are there any other questions?
I have maybe 2 follow-up questions. Did I hear that there's going to be sprinklers in the module buildings?
Commissioner Kendall, that is correct. So Gilbert Fire Code has a 0 square foot requirement. So even though these are very small, and in other municipalities you may not be required to be sprinkled, they will be required to due to our code.
Does that seem worth installing and going through with a fire riser, excuse me, for a space that's scheduled for 2 years?
Commissioner Kendall, so since we unfortunately don't have any provisions to consider this temporary, we have to consider it like it is a permanent development. So that's why they still have to go through those requirements. For example, if this site were to be a new site for the farmer's market or one of those type things, those items are temporary, have a special event permit, and that's why those items don't need to have the types of safety and requirements for temporary uses.
In regards to lighting, you had mentioned festival type lighting, which is a string of lights that would go from one end to another, and those would be secured. Is there any type of planned emergency lighting, either by post or that would be attached to the building to light the area up in case of an emergency?
Commissioner Kendall, that is not something I know the answer to, but something I can look into. The only lighting that they have proposed on their lighting plans are the string lights or festival lights. And during the conditional use permit process, we can ask the applicant some of these additional questions, or we can also wait until the next design review comes through and I can bring forth those questions.
Thank you.
And that did create a question for me. Are there any structures that would not require sprinklers, like an open air, say a shade structure for a stage, or other kind of shading structures that would not require sprinklers? Just a question. And if they found they wanted to add a shade structure of other sorts, sails, other awnings of other sorts, would that also come back to us or no?
Chair Shaka, so in regards to an open air structure requires sprinklers. So an open air structure is based off of square footage and also distance from the building if it needs to be sprinkled. I'll provide the exacts, but I believe as long as it's under 3,000 square feet and it's with at least 10 feet away from the building. And again, we can find those exacts that it wouldn't be required to be sprinkled if it's an open air structure.
And that's kind of exciting. Would that come back to us as a design change if they want to add something like that, detached and less than X number of square feet, just to provide shade for the public?
Chair Shaka, if the design review is approved, no, it would not come back to you. It would be through an administrative amendment, similar to the process to amend the landscaping, as long as it's under 5,000 square feet for any type of addition. That is something that qualifies for an administrative design review.
One final question, sorry. Oso is known for being super dog friendly. So is there anything in the plans for a dog run or things of that nature? And if so, that's again done on their own discretion later. It's super dog friendly kind of business.
Chair Shaka, I believe in some of their narrative, they talk about being family and dog friendly. I do not believe there's any plans for a dog run specifically or any of those items, but as you stated, they are a very dog friendly business. So I would assume so, but no specific plans for accommodations, at least for this development.
Are there any other questions?
I have another question. So, and some of your questions spurred this, so thank you. An additional amendment potentially would be if they find that OSO's restrooms are overloaded from the capacity at the open air event. Would that mean if they decided to add additional restrooms in that space, that it would be an amendment, or would that be another review?
Commissioner Meehan, so that would also be under the same classification of an amendment if they decided to come back and do that as well.
Any other questions? I think we have one online, but I think we also have a hand up online and then,
Why don't you let him?
yes. Let's go to online first. Commissioner Clausen.
Yeah, I just had a question for the applicant. If they had thought, these security questions kind of triggered a thought process. Has the applicant considered adding additional retail south of the entertainment facility? This container that is on the southeast portion of the site, adding additional retail, thereby almost giving it another wall on that side, similar to how it appears on Hearn Way, could be a way to actually increase the retail and provide for a higher than 4-foot security fence, and additional opportunity for local purveyors of, the art walk, et cetera.
Yeah, great comment. And then with that, I'll turn over to you, Commissioner Kendall.
Thank you. Last question. On page 23 of our handout, it says temporary commercial developments. As previously stated, the town does not recognize temporary commercial development, such that even though this might be a 2-year plan, it could technically run indefinitely while it's a business.
Commissioner Kendall, that is correct. So once this is approved, and if it is built, it then could run indefinitely, since it is through that process. We cannot enforce any type of time restrictions as a condition of approval for either the design review or the conditional use permit, to require them after 2 years to take down the development. So going forward, when considering your review for the development, that is something to take into consideration, that it could be there for the length, technically.
Thank you.
There's a lot of the commissioners keep bringing up the word temporary. In 2 years, it does move very quickly. And in downtown Chandler, we saw, I forgot how many months, it's called 8 months of temporary stages that had to come down, and a lot of businesses were upset. So I'm assuming this is after 2 years, it'll be reviewed, and if there's another opportunity for different development, that might happen, or maybe the applicant can do a renewal. But as far as our job goes, it looks like a exciting project, a great use of land that's not being used otherwise. And I think there will be an opportunity if the applicant comes up later and he took some notes that maybe he can address some of these questions under the next action item. At this time, I will open it up to the public if there's no more other commissioners with any other questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman, I do not have any requests to speak on this item.
So items will be heard at one public hearing, at which time anyone wishing to comment on that public hearing may do so. Comments will be heard from those in support and opposition to an item. So there's no more people that want to comment. So there'll be another opportunity, I think, in a future meeting for people to comment. So did you have any other comments or questions, staff?
Chair Shaka, no, at the design review, the public will have the ability to comment. Additional use permit, since it'll be on formal hearing, the public will have the ability to comment along with the applicant can be brought up here to provide feedback and answer questions.
Perfect. Perfect. Yep. So at this time, we will be looking at item number 3 on our agenda tonight. That's UP 21-12, the park, and that is the conditional use permit.
So this is the conditional use permit that I was talking about that is in conjunction with this review. So tonight, this conditional use permit is coming forth for a recommendation to the Planning Commission. So the Redevelopment Commission is not the approving body for conditional use permits, but provides a formal recommendation to the Planning Commission, who provides ultimate approval. So the design review that you just provided feedback on at study session will come back to you for formal approval if this conditional use permit is approved by the Planning Commission. Currently, it is scheduled to go to them on September 1st with your feedback. So a conditional use permit requires 4 findings of facts to be met in order to be approved. I have listed them here on the screen, so I'm just going to quickly go through how staff believe and how the applicant has provided feedback on how they have met these findings of fact to have the use that they are proposing. So the requested use is entertainment and recreation outdoor. So per our definition in our land development code, which I've displayed on the screen, the use they're proposing, which is unique in nature with multiple ancillary uses in a park-like setting with entertainment and recreation outdoors, does require a conditional use permit in the Heritage Village Center zoning district, which is the zoning district that this project is located in. So as I talked about previously, the uses that they're proposing are entertainment, retail, and bar and restaurant type uses. So all of those things are either included as a primary or adjacent use in this definition. And we talked about briefly the master site plan here, and here is the site plan again for the site that we just went over in the study session. Something that I'd like to note as we go forward is how the applicant has designed this site in order to provide mitigating measures for potential issues from arising. So this site, I'll go back to the aerial here for you, is bounded by existing right-of-way, so Hernway and Bryan Comp Boulevard to the north and to the east. And then beyond that to the east, we have the parking garage, which goes up to 78 feet, providing a physical barrier to the residents, which are located beyond the parking garage, in that it is now an apartment complex, but previous condominiums. It is also bounded on the north side, west side, and south side by existing developments. Just to provide some context of the overall environment. And then when going into the physical site, they located the retail along Hernway, facing and inviting the public to utilize their facilities and activate that streetscape. They located their main area central to the site to make sure that that type of uses are drawn inwards opposed to outwards, and then also face the entertainment module internal to the site and provided that wall behind there to do some noise mitigating measures. So the noise will primarily project towards the internal part of the development, not external towards those other uses, and also have that additional wall behind them. The applicant also did provide a additional statement that is in the back of your packet for the conditional use permit of their statement of intent with that entertainment section. So items that they talked about in there was the type of entertainment and live entertainment they're providing. So in their narrative, you notice that they did say this will be primarily used as AV storage equipment. They are proposing to do some projecting movies, so that's what it'll be used for most of the time, as a storage area for the AV equipment. When it is used for music or live entertainment, they are stating that it will be small level ambient bands that provide some just background noise and music there. They did also state in there that they will not have DJs, similar to some other developments in the district. So I'm going to quickly just go through these findings of fact. So the first findings of fact is listed up here. The proposed use will not be detrimental to health, safety, or general welfare of persons living or working in the vicinity to, adjacent property to the neighborhood, or to the public in general. So in blue, I highlighted the site, and in yellow, I highlighted the closest residential developments, like we talked about there, the apartments, and then we also have the single family homes to the south. So the apartments are the closest residential use at approximately 220 feet. And as I stated previously, it is bounded by existing developments, providing some protection from any noise items that may arise, as well as the placement of the physical modules inside of the site in a manner to provide nuisance from arising. Something to keep in mind with noise and odor and those items are all covered and regulated in our municipal code. So that's not in the land development code, but in the municipal code for the town of Gilbert. This development, even though outdoors, has to follow all the same standards as traditional commercial developments and does not qualify to exceed it. So for example, before 10 p.m., it cannot go above 65 decibels. After 10 p.m., it has to go to 55. So that's in our municipal code there, and they will have to follow that. The second finding of fact is the proposed use conforms to the purposes, intent, and policies of the general plan and its policies in any applicable area, neighborhood, or other plan adopted by the town council. So this includes the general plan, the land development code, and then heritage district specific items such as the redevelopment plan and the design guidelines. The redevelopment plan speaks along with the design guidelines to encouraging infill developments that bring a mix of uses to the district, and staff believes that they conform to these plans. The third finding of fact is the proposed use conforms to the conditions, requirements, or standards required by the zoning code and any applicable local, state, or federal requirements. So again, this project meets all minimum development standards per the design review that we are reviewing concurrently, and will be required to adhere to all of those additional nuisance laws and such that I previously described, such as noise and odor, and will be required to get all applicable business licensing and alcohol licensing if they pursue that as well. And the fourth is the proposed use as condition would not unreasonably interfere with the use and enjoyment of nearby properties. As previously discussed, the way that they have designed the modules and faced them and providing those mitigating factors, along with the location within an entertainment district bounded by existing development, staff believes that they meet this finding due to those items along with others listed in the staff report. To date, staff has received 2 comments from the public. One was an inquiry just asking for additional information from an adjacent business owner. The second was a resident in opposition to the project. The primary concerns were with noise and specifically the live entertainment portion of the development. There was concern with the noise traveling to residents across Gilbert Road, so it is projecting towards that area, so either impacting adjacent properties with noise or impacting residents in the vicinity. So concerns with how the noise will travel and how to measure and mitigate those types of unintended consequences. And staff is recommending that the Redevelopment Commission recommend approval to the Planning Commission for the conditional use permit with 2 conditions of approval. The first just being that this conditional use permit would be subject to the design review site plan. The second being that live entertainment shall cease operations no later than 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and by 12 a.m. Saturday and Sunday. And I am here for questions if you have them. We also have the applicant here with us to answer any additional questions you may have.
Great. I appreciate that. So any questions or comments from the commissioners? I think well, we had a couple prior, so that now that we're talking about looking at noise mitigating as part of this use, there might be some other questions from the commissioners. So with that, I'll turn over to the commissioners for questions.
I'm good. I think it's very thorough and very clear. I really appreciate you presenting it so simply and just telling us, about about the sound decimals and the timeframes and everything that they have to abide by. I think it's great. Thank you.
I had a question for staff when you're done. But any other questions while I'm waiting? I was going to ask a quick question to staff. Any other questions? Only question I had was that you mentioned something about decibels and time frames. Could you repeat those again for me?
Chair Shaka. So here, I believe I have a slide here for you. So if you look on your screen here, this is from our municipal code from the noise section. So for commercial areas, it is 65 decibels between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. and 55 between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Great. And then going back to that last the request for approval, the time frames, the ceasing of live music at 12 a.m. Is that an applicant request or is that what staff, is that kind of what you guys came to prior to today's meeting?
That is a staff request. So the applicant did provide hours of operation that they're proposing for the development as a whole. So those were numbers where we got those from, and we provided that in order to provide some parameters to address some resident concerns along with staff. I did want to note, which has been brought to my attention, that the second condition of approval has an incorrect statement on the hours of operation on there. I say live entertainment shall cease operation no later than 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and by 12 a.m. Saturday and Sunday. That should say Saturday and Friday. So I just do ask when making a motion and if considering the second condition to change Sunday to Friday for that recommendation.
Perfect. And they could be later, they open later, whatever those hours are in under different approvals for liquor or whatnot. And then one other question too, as when the applicant expressed, noise mitigating designs, sometimes you look at the way they build freeways, they have noise walls, which sometimes I'm not sure, I'm not an expert, but they're sometimes counterproductive the way it bounces off of something and it hits the garage. And I know other places around town, for example, the Perch in downtown Chandler, you can hear their music, from far away, and so I just didn't know if some of those things were considered, and more than from an architectural, standpoint, if somebody else came in with some real, knowledge as far as the way something was facing, or the way something was built, if it's not going to ricochet. I mean, there's really no houses immediately there. It just was a question about the concern, since it was brought up the way it was being designed to help mitigate some of that.
Chair Shaka, to my knowledge, there has not been a noise study done for this development, but from the knowledge of the architect and those items, it has been designed in a manner to try to provide the best opportunity to mitigate those. When the applicant comes up, we can ask him directly if they have done additional studies or taken items into consideration.
Perfect. And Commissioner Clausen online, do you have any questions or comments? I can't see if your hand's raised, so I'm just asking. None?
No, yeah, I think to your point, Chair Shock, I mean, even kind of goes back to that additional retail, potentially extending that entertainment portion to the south could provide a further barrier to the garage to the east. So I think the applicant should maybe look at that, but that's it. No questions.
Perfect. So at this time, are there any members of the public that would wish to speak on item number 3?
Mr. Chairman, we have one request to speak on item number 3 from Doralice Machado Liddell.
Good evening again. Doralice Machado Liddell. The only concern that I have, it's not with the design, other than the fact that, yes, we're talking about a use permit, but this is not a temporary. This is goes with the life of the land. So we really, when we say temporary, it is not temporary. So, I think that, and also regarding architecture, there is sound design in architecture. I think I'm not an expert. So I think design does include noise, and it's not temporary. The wall that's going to absorb most of it would be the parking structure. So I don't know why the sound, and I'm not an expert, wouldn't go towards the parking structure because that's the biggest, to face it going towards that, which is cars. Um, then also about the 55 decibels. How is that measured? I know we talk about it, but the noise ordinance is impossible to enforce. So I ask, is the 55 or 65, whatever that is, where is that measured at? Is it, I don't really know. So that is a question. Code compliance does not work nights or weekends. So it's up to the law enforcement officers to do that. I think that for this conditional use permit, when we're talking about outdoor entertainment, I do think they need restrooms. It's very important. The police department, a lot of the offenses seem to be urinating in public. So that's something that I think for a conditional use permit, I think it should be a condition that they're provided some restroom and relief. Oh, also, they don't have that many restrooms, and they're very small, speaking from experience. Um, so that is all my, everything else I like, and I think that it's going to be a good thing. I'm very, very concerned with noise, like I said. There are going, people in the district will be sleeping. They're going to be living there. There's going to be hotels where people will want to sleep. So whatever the impact of this venue will be, and I brought up Shady Park because Shady Park is a problem. So that's why I think you have to be proactive in your approach. Being reactive is saying, well, let the police department deal with it, or let the code compliance deal with it, or the neighbors. So that's all I ask, and I appreciate your time.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other members from the public wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have any other requests to speak.
So perfect. At this time, I'd like to ask if the applicant, if they're here, if they'd like to come up and make a few comments.
Bob Gutierrez with 61st Place Architects. The applicant, the owner, is taking his only daughter to college today, so that's why he didn't show up. Otherwise, he would be able to address a lot of these issues better than I. But in terms of the sound seems to be the big thing, and that's certainly something we considered in the design. That's why we faced it toward the Barlow building. And when I talked to Brian, the operator of this, the way he works he has a facility up in PV, and the way he works his sound is rather than having giant speakers, he puts smaller speakers around, so he doesn't have to project it out across the crowd. He has them behind him and in front of him and smaller. So that's his approach. Now our intent is also to put mass loaded vinyl inside the entertainment module, and that stops the sound from going back and bouncing. So it's something we've thought about. And then one thing that Brian said to me, he said, "I'm running a patio next door." So he's his first neighbor himself, and they have a sound system inside OSO, so they don't want this conflict of noise if you're between the patio and the park. So that's a concern of his. So he's not trying to build a place where there'll be national acts or anything like that. He's more interested in just making it a fun place, and it's family oriented. Kids are a big part of what he does. Regarding the use, he's leasing this from Mark Barlow, who owns the property to the west, and frankly, this property is probably a lot more valuable than what Brian is paying for. But Mark, the owner of that property, has wanted to have something like this on there for a while he awaits, and we just feel like it's going to open up the downtown and allow a sticky place for people if they're waiting to go to Oregano's or whatever. They can come over here, hang out, their kids can play around, and then they can get a beep and go to Oregano's. That's part of what he feels. I wish he was here to give his enthusiasm, because his intent is for everybody to be able to use this space, not just a feed for OSO. I guess that's all I have to say, unless you have any questions.
I'm good. Any commissioners? We typically don't take questions from applicants, but if there's anything, I mean, is there any questions that someone might have as far as kind of derived from here? Yeah, exciting. Thank you. I had one more question for staff. As far as prior applicants, whether it be Dirk Bentley's and other people, we're not doing anything here as far as what the applicant's asking for is nothing unusual and groundbreaking and a new bar raise or a new precedent set, right? I mean, it's very much in line with other activities and other properties with similar uses, correct?
Kirishaka, all the uses proposed are either the same or similar that are already seen in the district. The only difference is it being in an outdoor venue. That's what's triggering the conditional use permit.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm a big land rights person, and this is way better use than just dirt that doesn't really have much function. So it's exciting. Another place for people to gather and congregate. So it's exciting. So I will close. I guess if there's any more questions from other commissioners, otherwise I'll close it. Commissioner Clausen, anything from you? This is public, but I just want to make sure there's no follow-up questions.
Nope.
So is there anything else? So I'm closing the public hearing on item UP 21-12, and we'll look for the commission for any follow-up discussion and potentially to make a motion. Is there any follow-up discussion and or someone wanting to make a motion at this time? So without any more discussion, then I'll look for a motion from one of our commissioners.
I motion to approve UP 21-12, the park conditional use permit.
Thank you for that. Do we have anyone that would like to second Commissioner Big
Mr. Chairman, you would need to include the conditions if you're approving it with the conditions. So condition 1, your motion would have to state with the condition 1, and condition 2 with the change stating 12 a.m. Friday and Saturday.
I approve UP 21-12, the park conditional use permit with is it condition 1?
Yes.
Condition 1, and with condition 2, switching that Sunday to a Friday until 12 p.m.
A.m.
a.m.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Good catch.
I second the motion to approve UP 21-12 with condition 1 and condition 2 changing the Sunday to a Friday at 12 a.m.
Perfect. Thank you for that first and that second, clarifying both approval, recommendation for approval for 1 and 2 with that change. So with that, we have a first and a second. So with that, I will do a roll call vote for that motion recommendation for approval. So Commissioner Bigelow, do we have do you vote yes or no, yay or nay for approval?
Yes.
Perfect. And then Commissioner Clausen, do you vote yes or no for approval?
Yes.
And Commissioner Kendall, you vote yes or no for approval?
Yes.
Commissioner Meehan, do you vote yes or no for approval?
Yes.
And I also vote yes for approval. So the motion does carry unanimously. Congratulations to the applicant, and we're looking forward to this coming online. So very good. Thanks for the presentation also. At this time, I will open up the public hearing for item number 4, that's Z20-05, the LDS refresh. If staff will please provide their presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Redevelopment Commission. I'm Amy Thames. I've been visiting with you over the last year or so discussing various amendment aspects to the Land Development Code refresh that we've been working on over the last almost 2.5 years now. Oops, too far. And so if you'll recall, I did visit with you in July as the LDC refresh was put out to public comment. And we discussed some of the different aspects of it and what had been changed. We did receive about a handful or two of written public comments. We received a few communications verbally, and then we also received some communications via the social media aspect. We did put it out on Twitter, Facebook, and all the different sites that the town of Gilbert has and monitors. So during that time period, we went through those websites and we looked at the comments and to see what people were saying. A number of the comments that were out there had to do with general plan, had to do with parks, had to do with aspects that were not addressed in the land development code. Anything that was applicable to the land development code, we gleaned out of that and brought forward to a study session with the Planning Commission on August 4th. So we have done a marked up version, which is online, of any comments that have been made or addressed or changes that occurred to the document since it was released on July 7th. And so that way everybody could see if anything was changed due to the public comment, what the tracking of that was. So some of the public comment we did receive, and I'm going to particularly focus on items that pertain to the Heritage District with those comments. We did receive comments that the definition of bedroom wasn't adequate. We did add some additional language to that. As far as the temporary structure, we did add some additional language to that, clarifying the consecutive days and that it's a short term, is not a permanent structure. As far as the use benefit easements, there were comments both pro and con to use benefit easements. There were comments also pro and con to setbacks as it related to this graphic. What came of the discussion at Planning Commission was highlighting the property boundary, because some of the confusion was coming from, there are a lot of lines. And for anyone who's done, especially this is single family detached example, when there's a use benefit easement, it can get confusing, because you have your property and then on your adjacent neighbor's property, you have the right to use their property to maintain your home that sits on the zero property line. And so a lot of people have a difficulty getting their heads around that. Some of the comments that we received from the public was, we shouldn't even allow that because it's wrong. Because it does occur in someone's rear yard. You usually have to make an appointment with your neighbor in order to have maintenance done on the side of your home. They're not allowed to permanently build anything in that use benefit easement. And some of the comments we received were, they shouldn't be allowed to put any landscape there either, because it could affect my home if that's my home on lot B, because now somebody's planted right there, or I can't do proper maintenance on my home because now somebody's got shrubs or vines or plant material. All of those are very valid points. However, use benefit easements have been around for quite a long time, and these kind of subdivisions are all over Gilbert and have been for the last 20 or plus years. And we don't receive that many complaints from the neighbors. It usually is governed under CC&Rs of the Homeowners Association. And when you're buying into that, you should be made aware of what you're buying into when it comes to what is or isn't permitted within that use benefit easement. No pools, no koi ponds, no outdoor fireplaces that are built permanently. So those are the kind of things that are outlined in CC&Rs when you're purchasing a property or through deed restrictions. So the only change we made per Planning Commission was outlining the property in a colored format. It ended up orange, I believe, in the code. Do that. Okay, I didn't touch it. How about we put it back on the slideshow and try this one more time? I didn't have a finger anywhere near. Okay. Okay, cross-access easement. We did receive a comment about the cross-access that was in the current code restricted, where you cannot restrict or you cannot cross through commercial property to permanently access residential property with the primary access, and vice versa through business park. There was not a lot of cross-access allowance within the current code. As we move toward infill properties, as we move toward build out of the overall town, staff felt that cross-access was going to be very important. And it was one of the amendments we made with the LDC subcommittee originally, removing that so that it wouldn't have to be a PAD amendment in order to strike that and as a base zoning district regulation. So that had already been excluded, and the person who asked that question was quite happy that that was no longer in the code. As far as planned area developments, there was some comment that we shouldn't exclude anything, that anything at all could be amended in a planned area development, that the whole code should be open to amendment. That's not necessarily a standard procedure in planning practices, and not that the town of Gilbert follows all procedures that everyone else does, but we did discuss it with our legal department. We discussed it with our management, and the way the code is written today, it limits it to base zoning districts. And so we realized that that may be a little too limiting. So, but what we decided to do is list the exclusions. So land uses are not allowed to be amended. And that is due to the fact that we are not a chartered municipality. It actually restricts us through that. So that's not a choice, that is a fact. Supplemental land uses, once again, it's a land use. Parking. Parking cannot be amended through a PAD as far as ratios or anything requiring an administrative use permit. So if there's already a process in place allowing for an amendment, it's not going to be amended in a PAD. So there are some parking items such as distancing from right of way to cross access within a development. Those kind of things could be amended and give some flexibility to choose special design or a conflict that is hard to perceive. It's hard to write a code for every scenario out there. The minute you think you've got it, there's going to be a scenario you didn't anticipate. So there has to be a little latitude. Signs are not amended through a PAD. They can be amended through a variance, but for very specific dimensional proportional things. And then walls and fences. There is a wall and fence modification process that is in code. We did enhance that process over this LDC update. We bifurcated it and made it address some of the situations. Once again, there's always an anomalous situation. There is never, we do not live in the world of black and white. There's all gray. And so we were always finding that there was something that it didn't address. So we tried to add some flexibility into the fence modification, but we're keeping it out of the planned area development so that it is a process that can go straight to planning commission and simplify it for the applicant or homeowner. Solid roof over private open space. This was something that was being added. It's been a design guideline element for years. We were codifying it, but we did get some questions about clarification. And the clarification requested was, and we agreed, that it is only over the required private open space. So the solid roof covering is only for the 60 or 80 square foot that's required under code. If they provide additional open space, you don't have to cover it. Same thing with the drive-through. You need to provide a solid roof over a drive-through, and that is for climate control. And I know people say, it doesn't rain here in Arizona. Well, I'll point outside today, but I will also say the hot sun has a great impact. And I'm sure many of you, as well as myself, have touched a door handle or went to pay at a drive-through and their hot little metal shelf burned your arm. That is what the protection is for. So this has been a design guideline that we have been requesting for years. Once again, we're just codifying it, and here we were just clarifying. Single family attached product type. The word apartment was removed. There was some concern that it's single family. Why are we allowing apartments in single family? We can understand the concern and the confusion there. So we removed the word apartment to simplify. Step backs. If you recall, we discussed step backs the last time I was here. There was a comment received from the public that step backs should be stricken from the LDC. There shouldn't be step backs at all. We do not need to govern massing. The Planning Commission discussed that, and they did not agree with that. They felt that the latitude that was given in the step backs and how we eased it up on a little bit, and we made it very clear within the Heritage District where it needed to be and why, they felt those were all very valid and that they should still stay within the Land Development Code as modified. Parking clearances, just making sure that clearances for car doors and clearances for pulling in and pulling out from poles and supports needed to be taken care of. And the Planning Commission thought that language needed to stay in there also. And that's the same with side clearances as you open into planters or trees or such. Median entries, there was some clarification language that was requested by a developer regarding how wide the median entry could be. We recognize that the intent of the language needed another word or two to make it clear. So there was no confusion, and we took care of that, and they were fine with it. bike parking, that was a typo, and I will take responsibility for that. I do not know how we got the ratio in there that was there, but we cleared it up. I went back to the markups from the Land Development Subcommittee, and it was one. It was for bike parking spaces for every entrance in or out of a building. And then vertical district overlay. Once again, as we stated the last time, there is no Area 6. There was never intended to be an Area 6. It was a mistake on the mapping. It's been taken off. And even if it had been approved, there's no text supporting it, so it never could have been applied. Accessory dwelling units probably got the most comment of any subject change within the Land Development Code. And with the accessory dwelling units, some of the comments that were brought forward by the public were very, very valid comments. And as staff studied the comments and worked through it, we agreed that it needed to be vetted further. And so we recommended to the Planning Commission to pull the accessory dwelling unit language, to reinstate the language for secondary dwellings, guest quarters, and facility manager dwelling units, put what is in the code back in there. And we are going to pull this out and make it a separate text amendment, because we think it is the largest amendment that was proposed within the Land Development Code. And we thought, as I said, that there were very valid comments. And so this is something that needs to be taken care of separately. So it's been taken and swapped back out. Modifications to double car garage sizes. The Home Builders Association had some comments at the Planning Commission study session, and staff did accept their comments and changes were made for that. And then later in the week after Planning Commission, the Home Builders Association reached back out with additional concerns. Staff once again agreed that some of their concerns are valid and needed to be further vetted. So we went ahead and struck the well, I struck more than the double car garage. I struck the whole garage table that was in there, took it out, and we're going to address that during the upcoming LDC amendment for circulation, parking, and loading. If you'll recall, I mentioned that that is a text amendment that is going to be moving forward during this fiscal year, and we have monies in the budget to have a specialty consultant come in and give us advice regarding parking and various circulation aspects of codes. So that was taken back out, and we are going to address it elsewhere. And then there's a number of staff pickups. One neighbor did comment, I'll be blunt about, said that there's a lot of errors in this document. There's a lot of typos, but they didn't want to offer where they were. And I took that as a personal challenge, that we have been searching the document forward and backwards, looking for every possible period, comma, typo, you name it, we're looking for it. So we're still looking for it. And we are able, and I double checked this with legal, we are able to make scrivener's errors corrections as long as it does not change the content of the document. So if there's a comma missing, I will still add a comma. I'm still tracking where those commas are, but I wanted you to be aware that I did find 5 today. Still looking. I can't tell you how many times I've read this document, but I try to take a different area each time so that I'm fresh. Height in the Heritage District. This was a conversation that probably took the most time at the Planning Commission study session back on the 4th. And within the Heritage District, I'm going to go back a little bit here, but in the redevelopment plan for the Heritage District, it talked about the different areas and the character that was to be built in these areas and the preservation of certain character. And then the Heritage Design Guidelines built on that a little further and talked about how to preserve particularly some of these single-family neighborhoods, such as Greenhaw, which is on the east side of Gilbert Road, just north of Elliott, south of the railroad tracks, and then Lacey Tract, which is on the west side of Gilbert Road, north of Elliott, south of the railroad tracks. And so in the design guidelines, architectural styles were applied to these 2 neighborhoods based on the architecture, the lot sizes, and the character that was expressed during some of these redevelopment plan neighborhood meetings and subsequent meetings from the neighbors of what they kind of wanted their neighborhood to be like, what they were striving for, and what they wanted to preserve, the character. So Greenhaw is predominantly a ranch style, 1-story, low slung, typical 70s ranch. And one of the things that's in current code is that you can have 36 feet, 3 stories. Most ranch style remodels maybe go 2-story. You don't often see a 3-story ranch modification. You're starting to get out of the style of ranch, and you're starting to get into a more modern style or a totally different style. And that would change the character of the neighborhood. So the design guidelines limited Greenhaw neighborhood to ranch style, which is still a fairly broad category. What the LDC refresh decided to do was maybe lock in 2-story instead of allowing for 3-story, so that the character was kept a little better with what would be typically expected with a remodel of that architectural style. In Lazy Track, a little more latitude was given. There's a little more variety within that neighborhood. Bungalow, farmhouse, cottage, traditional, arts and crafts, craftsman, you can put all those in there. And any style not listed, as what we've talked about in the past, would come back to the RDC for decision on whether it's appropriate or not. Contemporary and modern were not permitted. With that being said, when you're getting to 36 feet, you still have your 36 feet, but we were limiting it to 2-story. One of the neighbors felt that it shouldn't be limited, it should still be 3-story. And there was quite a bit of discussion at the Planning Commission on whether it's appropriate to limit it or not. And in all fairness, I did some further research on some of these different architectural styles, and some do lend themselves to a small lot 3-story design. Farmhouse, you would tend to see dormers in an attic scenario, and that attic scenario would be a 3rd floor. The arts and crafts or craftsman style, you can get a very nice 6,000 square foot lot, 3-story, and it looks appropriately proportioned. Some of the others, when you start to try to stretch a ranch upward instead of outward, or the mission, or even the territorial ranch, start to look a little out of proportion and start to look more modern or contemporary than they do really the architectural style that most people envision for these. And so there are some that could potentially still be 3-story and work, but there's others that probably wouldn't look so good. So with that being said, the Planning Commission took a very informal vote, and it was a 3-4 decision on whether there should or shouldn't be a limitation to 2-story versus 3. So I believe it went in favor of keeping the 2-story with the 4, and 3 was in against. But they did ask that the Redevelopment Commission, since this is your purview in the downtown area, discuss this topic a little further. And I do know there's a resident here this evening who would like to discuss it also. With that being said, on our timeline, we are here this evening for a recommendation to the Planning Commission as the ultimate decision this evening by this board and commission as to whether it should move forward with approval or denial to Planning Commission, and then subsequently to the September 21st meeting of the Town Council for acceptance of the Land Development Code refresh. So with that being said, I do have the recommendation when the time comes, but at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I do know, as I stated, there is a resident here this evening who'd like to speak.
So Greg, I think I have 2 questions, but are there any questions from other commissioners at this time? None? Mr. Clausen online, do you have your hand raised? Any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I just had a quick question about the solid roof. Was there any necessary differences between attached or detached, or any need for clarification there as far as that requirement of the 1680?
That's an interesting question. Thank you for that. It could be attached or detached. The code does not speak to that. So they could put a freestanding patio structure that's detached in a little yard in some cases, or on a portion. It's not common for you to see it that way, but it could be done, yes.
I was just curious that you said you cannot think of every scenario. So I didn't know, sometimes it's a requirement to have something attached versus detached, but you could see a nice design, maybe including detached of some sort. So that was.
Not to my knowledge have we had that request, but I do believe there isn't anything in code that would restrict it. So if they want to be creative with their solution, we'd be most certainly open to listening.
And the other question I had was about the restriction against contemporary and modern. Is that at any time subjective from a staff level? And what if somebody brought something forward that was borderline? One of our commissioners, I think, does a great job with great product in our downtown, and it's old but new, and it's cool and it's fun, and it's kind of, someone would argue it's modern, someone would argue it's not modern. And so I didn't know if it was subjective from a staff level and it got rejected altogether, or if an applicant said, hey, I appreciate you thinking this, but I want to come before the commission.
And that would certainly be acceptable, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect.
Anytime we can always elevate a decision at staff level to a board or commission.
Perfect. Good. Perfect. And I think sometimes from a staff level, some applicants don't know that that's a possibility that they can do that. Sometimes staff will, well, we've never approved something like this. So I appreciate that comment because sometimes applicants may not know that's in their right and it may fall flat and it may get rejected. But it's nice to know that, staff would say, hey, it doesn't meet it, but bring it forward and see what happens, right? So I do appreciate you making that comment.
And Mr. Chairman, it is clearly stated in the design guidelines. So if they've read their design guidelines, it is there and staff would reiterate that.
Perfect. Good. Any questions online or in the house here? We have one.
It's
Yeah, go
not a question, maybe more of just a comment. I think if Greenhaw, if we were only to go 2-story there, but still allow them to build 36 feet, I think that would look more out of place and more disproportional than if we had let them go 3 stories. I'm not saying we need to change it. It's more of just a comment and just,
I see what you're saying, and Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, but there have been some ranch-style renovations that could add dormers that for just skylight purposes
yeah.
or clear story windows. Other architectural features that could enhance the roof line, but not necessarily provide another floor. But the 36 would allow for some of those roof pitch flexibilities.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. So at this time, are there members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
Mr. Chairman, we have one request to speak from Doralice Machado Liddell.
And Mr. Chairman, while Doralice is making her way down here, I just wanted to clarify that if there are any changes you would like, we'll add them as conditions of to the recommendation, and then I will take those recommended conditions of approval to Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Good evening, Doralice Machado Liddell again. I just have I've talked to you multiple times regarding the property rights. I think the 3 stories at 36 feet allows flexibility, and I think in the area in Lacey Track, you can't. One of the comments from the Planning Commission was consistency with other SF6 properties within Gilbert. But there isn't any consistency in the Lacey Track, and there never has been. So if the only way to be consistent is if you leveled all the houses and started all over again. So that's why I think that it's very important that allowing the property owner the flexibility to come up with a design that would be appropriate. And Amy did mention the attic space or having a living space above. And also there was something else and I can't remember. I'm very tired. So I just asked that it's remained the same. The Lacey Track and the Heritage District, we always are under the guides of changing zoning. And I think we need to let it go and let the private sector come up with the design and the plans. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that wish to speak on this item? Are there any questions from staff at this time? Or any follow-up questions from the commissioners? If not, I'm going to look for a motion of some sort. And whoever makes the motion, I would ask that you read from page 75 of your packet, read A, read B, C, D, and E, the conditions, the A through E conditions, if you would, when you're making that motion. But there's been a lot of work put into this, a lot of public process put into this, and a lot of thought put into this. And whether you're working in PDF or working in Word, I mean, I'm sure that we can do some spell check and grammar check. But aside from that, the content, the meat and potatoes, if you will, there's been a lot of thought in here. And I think there's a lot of, in my personal opinion, a lot of flexibility as far as someone still bringing things, forward that are they work with what's existing and kind of the evolution of our downtown. So I think it's a well thought out, document. And so with that, I will be looking for a motion at this time.
Sure, Chuck. I
Question.
have one more question before that for staff.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that question is, staff had brought up dormers on the 36-foot requirement, and that would be considered a 3rd story. how would staff look at a potential basement if, for example, in theory, a basement was added and they built 2 stories above that? Would that be considered 3 stories?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you very much for that question. Just to clarify, if the dormers are in an attic space that is not livable condition space, it would not count as a 3rd floor. It counts as attic space. That is not a 3rd floor. It would
Right.
have to be livable condition space. And a dormer could be used in order to project as a skylight or just as an architectural feature with spandrel glass or some other screening so that the windows are faux. So just for clarification there, as far as your basement question, as long as the basement does not project greater than 6 feet above the ground, it is not considered a floor. So you could see, just like, if you picture row houses in Chicago or something, where you can see the lower level and you walk down a few steps and there's a few windows that are like right at shoe level. Laverne and Shirley, I'm dating again. That would not count as a floor. It would still be a 2-story building as long as you're not greater than 6 foot. And the code defines basement. So that is very clearly written in there. So it would be if you have full 3 levels above that.
Above grade.
That are
Okay.
livable. Yes,
Thank you for that clarification.
certainly.
So I'm going to close the public portion of this item, and then I guess look for commissioners for further dialogue, questions, comments, and without any, then someone can make a motion. So the public portion is closed, and if there's any more comments from the public, and even now, I mean, not from the public, but now from our commissioners, I'll look to you for those.
Chair Shaka, I have a question, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but in regards to contemporary versus modern, has that been defined?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, no, it hasn't been defined because, as you pointed out, architecture and architectural styles are somewhat subjective. And you can see what's called a modern farmhouse. And does lap siding make does it make a farmhouse? What makes farmhouse? So I think it would have to be studied with proportions, massing, features, various elements. And our majority of the elements that people expect, we kind of have, I'll be quite honest, we have cheat sheets for various architectural styles that we've gathered from various sources throughout, whether it be architectural guidelines, planner's dictionary, and other such, to help us guide when we're doing reviews of standard plans. We would be using those similar guidelines to subjectively judge the architecture. Is it meeting a style? Once again, if we're not sure that it's meeting it, we're coming to you. And that's not an additional cost to the neighbor. That's just us deciding to bring it to you for a decision on whether you feel it's meeting that parameter enough that you're comfortable for that neighborhood.
Thank you.
I have another question for you, Amy. So if architecture is subjective, if an applicant had a design and it's 3 stories in a particular style that's not typically 3 stories, all of those applications would still go through the design review process, correct or not correct? Not correct.
No, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, custom homes, which would be in these neighborhoods, do not come for you unless staff elevates it through this process that was defined as part of the design guidelines. So staff who review staff in building department who's looking at a custom home would have to call up to planning and say, I've got one here. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Do you want to come look at it? And then staff would evaluate it, and planning staff would determine whether it's something that needs to come before the redevelopment commission, or we're comfortable enough making a determination.
Thank you. That clarified. I have another general question. Maybe it's a legal question. So then if these conditions that are listed here,
Mhm.
is the condition A to approve the keeping it 3 stories, or is that dropping it to 2 stories? I'm not clear.
It's currently dropped to 2 stories. The Planning Commission kept the recommendation from the Land Development Subcommittee and staff to keep it or to change it to 2 stories. Currently in today's code, it is 3 stories. In the LDC refresh, it is 2 stories. If you wish to take it back to 3 stories, that would be an additional condition of approval that you would add under appendix number 1 graphics. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? That was an interesting last follow-up question that Commissioner Meehan had, and so I didn't know, not to put you on the spot, Commissioner Bigelow, but as a builder, I mean, how are you as far as 2 stories and 3 stories, and I mean, what's your take on this?
I completely understand where, why the thought is to keep it at 2 floors, especially if you can do a partially sunken basement that doesn't exceed 6 feet. For what the lots are and how big they are, I mean, if you go 3 stories tall and you're still, I don't know, it's just a lot of stairs and it's a lot of stuff. I mean, they're not multifamily. So I think if it was, this wouldn't even be a discussion. For a single family home, you're not off the hook. I have one more question. So going with the 2 stories, it's very clear that in Green Hot, it can be 36 feet up to 2 stories, but is that also in Lacey Track as well? Just the 2 floors? And that'll never go to multifamily. That'll always stay single family residential.
Multifamily has never been discussed in those 2 neighborhoods. The multifamily height requirements did not change for the Heritage District.
I mean, it does restrict you, and especially like Dorlise was saying, just having the right to be able to build that tall. But at the same time, given the neighborhood, I think building 3 stories would be, 36 feet tall would be big. Just to give some reference, I built that big house on the corner, and that's 23 feet. So, stack on another, 12 feet on that, 13 feet, and then that's where you're at. Like that would be a really big house, a really tall, small, narrow house. Not saying you can't build something or design something that could look good, but it would be tough.
And my question came, we went out, decades ago and we built suburbs, and now we see things coming back, critical mass in our city centers and infill. And so I didn't want to do anything that potentially would be counterproductive to people wanting to live and work and play, in a dynamic downtown, like Gilbert is. So just was trying to just, put that out there for you guys to consider. But yeah.
I don't build the condo, type structures with the, the garage down below and the 2 floors above. That's not my particular style, but I know it is to a lot of people, and it could be, but that's more of what it would have to be on a 6,000 square foot lot. That's what you'd be looking at doing. And that would be one of the only reasons you would ever go that high, in my personal opinion.
Follow-up question then, if someone were to go that high, then what does that do to the foundation? Does it have to be completely ripped out?
100%. You can't, I'd bet a lot of money that there's no house in Gilbert that you can add a second structure on with leaving the existing footings and concrete and walls without doing some serious footing repairs and beams and post.
Would it say then it's probably safe to say it's beyond cost for that to make sense?
That is a very subjective statement, only because I've seen a lot of people buy a lot of really expensive stuff and rip it down and build something even more expensive. And if it was me, I would go under. If I was trying to get my 3 floors, I would build a basement, but
which then that would also require
more cost. But if you're building and adding on something that's substantial, you're leveling the home and building new.
Fair enough.
So the 36 feet though doesn't change. It's limiting the opportunity to use that 36 feet for 2 floors versus 3.
Yes.
Okay.
And the question the reason it kind of prompted me, we've looked at different things outside of residential, on Gilbert, where we found it appropriate maybe to kind of push the limits on height, and height's always come before our commission, so I just want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's, not good for the future. And again, not that I guess an applicant could always ask for an exception and plead their case, right, and why they want to do something different. But just want to make sure that I'm throwing that out there before any kind of motion's made.
If that kind of brings up a question, if an applicant did want to do the 3 floors and do this, is that even possible after this is passed or no?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, interesting question. As you've noted, there are people who tend to spend money to do what they want to do, and they could apply for a planned area development modification to the zoning and come through a process and do a public hearing process. It would come before you for recommendation. It would go to Planning Commission for recommendation and ultimately to Town Council for approval for the 3rd floor. It could be done. It's highly unlikely a variance would occur because you have to meet state findings for the variance. And so you'd have to prove that there's something about your lot that's irregular, that was brought upon you. A wash opened up, an act of God, act of nature occurred, and now you can't use your lot the way you should be able to and the way your neighbors do. Most of Greenhaw and Lacey Track are fairly standard lots, and they already have residential homes on them. So it'd be very hard to justify a variance under state law. So it could happen, but it's highly unlikely a variance, and it would be most likely that it could occur through a planned area development at a somewhat substantial cost.
Any follow-up questions or discussion? If not, I'll be looking for a motion as is, as read, or a motion with changes or additions. So I will let somebody take the onus and take charge to kind of put that, to make that motion. Any other?
I have one more question.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
sure, no problem.
Do we know how many 3 stories are in Lacey Tract right now?
I would say 0. I'm going to look to Doralice, and she's going to confirm 0.
Okay.
The only 3-story residential that I believe we have in downtown are the MFL on the east side of Gilbert Road. There are some condos that, like duplex condos, that were approved. I do not believe they're constructed yet, but there are, I believe, 2, and they are exactly what was described. It's forward-facing garages on the 1st floor. Basically, their whole ground floor is garage with a door, and then the living quarters, the main living quarters, are on the 2nd floor, and then bedrooms and other subsequent living quarters or decks are on the 3rd floor. But those are the only 2 that I can think of off the top of my head.
Are we allowed to ask your opinion? Only reason being because I respect the planning and your history and everything that you've done. And I think forward thinking, it's hard because I know a lot of the homes don't even have foundations, and a lot of people buying them are going to be ripping them down and building. And so I'm curious, as our head city planner, of what your thoughts are.
I hate to limit creativity. I do believe in allowing for creativity. However, I did also hear what the neighbors were saying during some of these public comment processes, and a majority of people who seem to want to move forward with homes or development in these areas tend to, there's the ability to do really beautiful creative development, and then there's the ability to go out and buy a generic plan and plop it on the lot and call it good. And some of the comments we heard from the neighbors were, we don't want tract homes in our neighborhood. And the finger was pointing, so that's why I'm doing that. And they wanted it to have character. They wanted it to stay unique. And Doralice is correct. There's nothing similar. Every house in Lacey Tract is a little different, and every house in Greenhaw is a little different. And that's what makes it interesting. So I hate to limit the creativity, but I also know that if there's not some limitations put to it, we could end up with less than adequate homes being designed and built that we can't do anything about. And then the neighbors are going to be unhappy that the charm of their neighborhood, or the potential improving charm of their neighborhood as people redevelop, isn't moving in the direction that was envisioned. So that is where the thought process is coming from, and trying to look at what would be a typical properly proportioned size home on those lots, because some of the lots in Lacey Tract are only 3,000 square feet. So you really are a vertical pencil going straight up with that house. And others are on the standard 6,000. And then I believe we limited the lot size to 6,999 in some of those, so that we couldn't there wasn't the opportunity to take 3, 4, 5 lots and create a McMansion, which would also be out of character to the neighborhood. So we were just trying to proportionally keep the neighborhood to a level that was proper. And when you're on those size of lots, when you start going up for those, most of those architectural styles, the base wants to proportionally move out with it as you go higher. But you're going to be going higher and higher, and you're going to either be very garage centric, or you're going to start to get a proportionality that is awkward feeling, and people may not be able to put their finger on why it doesn't feel right. Maybe beautiful materials, it may be beautiful colors, but they can't quite say why that building feels like it's about to fall on them. Well, that's usually because the proportions got out of whack. And sometimes the goal of achieving square footage outweighs the design aspect of what is proportionally proper. And so that was where the thought process was coming from. It was discussed with the LDC subcommittee and staff. It was not a singular item that was selected by one person. And it was trying to reinforce the design guidelines, which the design guidelines had to say, maximum 3 stories, because that's what code said. So, but it's preferred that it not be greater than 2. So we were just trying to now come back and reinforce the design guidelines again and what we were hearing from neighbors. If you feel that it's too limiting, it can go back to 3, which it is today, and we have no problem with that. So I don't know that I gave you an opinion, but
You gave me a great one. It was very, very beautifully said and stated, and it completely answered my question. I think the fact that if we do this, it's not taking away the option of putting in a basement and adding that extra square footage makes me feel very comfortable. I personally don't think I would build in any of those areas a 3-story building. I just wouldn't. And I agree with you 100% about the proportions and the spacing and how it would look out of funk, but keeping it open for people to be creative and build and kind of do what they want is kind of where I was thinking. But I do agree that it would look very much more proportional. And I think of all those homes, I don't know how many neighbors are the entries, Lacey Tracks, but a very few amount of them would ever go 36 feet, 3 stories tall, and those ones would just be sticking out. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Commissioner Kendall, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair Saka. In regards to the accessory dwelling unit, we heard the public comment on their property rights and allowing renters, especially in separate quarters. It says here that this was the most notable topic, which I imagine it was, considering the conversation that we've had over the last 2 to 3 meetings. How was that addressed, and where's it at now?
Chairman and Commissioner, that was removed from the Land Development Code refresh because there was concern that there were multiple concerns. One, how items were grandfathered. Okay. And so prior to the ULDC, which was a code pre-LDC, the ULDC did not require that you get a use permit or an administrative use permit, for that matter, for a secondary dwelling. You could pay the additional development fees. So you pay just as like you're building a brand new house, you pay all the development fees that you would if you were building a new structure. But you didn't have to get a conditional use permit. But you also had the right to rent it. You had the right to a full kitchen. And then when the LDC came online, they applied a use permit to that. And along the way, we changed it from a use permit to an administrative use permit to help limit the process and not have to come through a public hearing process. You could do it through an administrative process that was noticed to the neighbors but didn't require a hearing. And so we were taking it the next step and saying, okay, there are guest quarters which are allowed, and there are secondary dwellings which are allowed with the administrative use permit. But we were finding that a lot of people were circumventing the system. They were building the guest quarters. They were putting in kitchens and renting it, which is not legal under code. You aren't allowed to rent guest quarters, and you aren't allowed to have a full kitchen. So they were circumventing paying the fees and getting the proper permitting. And so those kitchens were probably going in with, well, I know they were going in without a permit because they wouldn't have gotten permitted. So now you have safety hazards in people's rentable, not rentable, but yet rentable units. And so we were trying to say, look, let's let's help the citizens not have to do this roundabout. You know, they're trying to circumvent the system. We know they're trying to circumvent it. We get neighbors narking out on neighbors all the time, telling you my neighbor's renting and I don't like it. You go over there and stop it. So we said let's combine them and create the accessory dwelling unit. You can rent it. You can have a kitchen. But you still have to pay the fee, but it's by right. And so and it had to be within the building envelope. That's always been the given. It had to be in the building envelope. It couldn't be attached to a garage that was stuck in the setback outside the building envelope, except, I know she was thinking it, except if you were a loft. And so one of the things that we get a lot of comments and complaints about is my neighbor has a garage and now he took his gym that he had over his garage and he made it into an apartment and now they're staring at my pool all day and they don't like it because that garage could be outside of the building envelope. And so we were saying, okay, let's not have that anymore. You got to be in the building envelope because building envelopes historically were always made so that living quarters were buffered. Your neighbor was buffered from you, you were buffered from your neighbor, you're inset a little bit. Now that's why accessory structures could be outside of the setbacks. And we've always had in the rear half or the rear 2/3. So that wasn't new. But we did add the provision, and this came from a discussion about pride of ownership and oversight. And I'm going to be honest, it came from a lot of the vacation rental by owner discussions that they had a guest quarter, they had a secondary dwelling, and they had the primary structure, and all three were vacation rentals, and all three were being rented out as party houses. And in several occasions for code compliance complaints, there were 24 individuals having a massive party on these houses on a regular basis, 3 houses in a row, all in the same scenario, all happening, and the block was turning into Party Central, which if you read any of the items about vacation rental by owners, Las Vegas has a huge problem with that, where whole subdivisions are being brought up and the whole subdivision is being turned into a party rentable vacation rentals. And not that I'm aware of. Well, and so one of the ideas was that when you have a rental and there's not oversight by the owner, maybe it can go awry. And so if there was ownership oversight, whether you lived in the accessory dwelling or whether you lived in the primary structure, there would be oversight. And so that was where the idea came from, is that, okay, you don't have to live in one or the other, you just have to live in one. It was pointed out that there are existing grandfathered units out there that the owner doesn't live in either. So now what are they supposed to do? Or here's an accessory dwelling unit that was done pre-LDC that doesn't have a use permit to prove that, yes, it's in our books that they were permitted, but there's no documentation of exactly what was permitted. There was an accessory unit permitted, blah, blah, blah. Was there a kitchen? Wasn't there a kitchen? What was permitted? Because we don't keep those plans after the C of O occurs. So how are those people grandfathered or not? So there was this legal trail that was occurring as to what is the answer to this? How are we going to do this? Because the second we bring this into ordinance, somebody's going to have that and we're going to have to figure it out. So the idea for that was let's figure it out now. The idea to the lofts discussion, let's figure it out now. And the idea of whether the owner needs to live there or not was discussed. And we just all decided there was too many questions that still needed to be vetted that people weren't comfortable with. And so that is why we pulled it out of code. So right now in code, it's gone back to, you can have a guest quarters attached to your house. It cannot be rented. It cannot have a kitchen. And there are requirements that it aesthetically match the architecture of the building, of the primary structure. And it's temporary. Somebody's supposed to live there, visit, go away. They're not supposed to rent it for an extended period of time. Okay. And then you have the secondary dwelling, which you would have gotten with either by right prior to the LDC under a conditional use permit, or after that, an administrative use permit. You can rent it. It can have a kitchen. It has to have parking where the guest quarters don't, because they're just visiting. They flew in, right? Grandma doesn't have a car, whereas this person who's renting from you has a car. They live there every day. They go back and forth, in and out. So that has gone back into code. You can have loft above a garage back just as it is in code. It has to be in the building envelope. It has to match, and you cannot see the front door from the street, not to forget that one, just as it is in code today. Facility dwelling manager is in code today. It only applies to specific uses, as was approved under that text amendment probably about 6 years ago. And that is for specific uses that need caretakers, whether it be a pastor lives at a church, or you need a facilities manager at a public storage facility, or There's one where a nursery had some of their groundskeeper staff living on site for security as well as maintenance over times when the plants need water, but it's a holiday or whatever. So there's a list of probably about, I'd say close to 20 commercial, non-residential uses that can have one, though I will say there is the nursery that can have two accessory dwelling units to care for the facility. And so that is now back in and addressed. So the use chart has gone back to the way it was, and we will take that through with a separate text amendment when time comes. All right. That was probably more of an answer than I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Make sure we're on the same page.
I appreciate your passion, your knowledge, your experience. It's great. Downtown Gilbert is not Asheville or Nashville. I just got back from Nashville, and had I not just returned from Nashville, I wouldn't have even mentioned. But my son's best friend bought a house. He's 29, and it's called Tall and Skinny. I'm like, what are these things? Oh, we call them Tall and Skinnies. So if you Google Tall and Skinny Nashville, or if you Google the skinny on the tall in Nashville, if you Google that, there's a lot of ugly examples of tall and skinny homes, but there's some good examples where you do have a garage on the first and a living room on the second. And so I'm a fan of keeping it, 3 stories. I think there's some interesting, cool products that can be built that would fit our types of allowed designs. So I personally, I'd like to keep it at 3. Had I not been to Nashville, Tennessee, some of it is hill related, some of it is flat ground. We're flat here. There's some cool looking, if you look up tall, skinny Nashville, there's some cool things that might fit in down here. But, I'm not going to lose sleep if it's only 2 stories. I just personally think that 3 could eventually provide some cool options down here. But those are my personal comments. I'm okay either way. But with that, I'll look for some kind of motion from one of our commissioners. And if you make a motion, again, you can add to it. You can also, you can add, but also if you don't add, if you're looking at just what's on in front of us, page 75 and 76, I would ask you to, when you give a motion, to read the details of that motion. So do we have a motion is there a motion by any commissioners at this time? No pressure.
Yeah, Chair Shock, I would tend to agree with your analysis. I mean, I think the discussion on 2-story versus 3-story, one thing that we're not changing is the height that is allowed in those areas, which is 36 feet. So I tend to struggle with imagining what a 36-foot structure that's only 2 stories would look like. To Commissioner Bigelow's point, the home that he developed there over is 20, I think you said 28 feet. So imagine a 2-story structure that's 36 feet. We're not changing the 36-foot requirement. We're keeping that in place. So I think, not knowing where architecture may go, I would make a motion to approve, but with not limiting the 36 to 2 stories, but keeping it as is. And I would need help on that motion, approve on everything that I need to include in that motion. But I would amend it to keep the 36 feet and 3 stories.
So with that, could staff give suggestions if Commissioner Clausen wanted to make a motion in that direction?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if he could just read the motion as written and then at the very end add with the amendment, with the condition of approval that within the Heritage District SF6, SF7, and SFT, that they would be permitted 36 feet, 3-story by right.
Would that be an additional letter, A, B, C, D, E, and then that would be F? Okay, so F would have that language.
Okay, so I'll try. I would make a motion to approve for the LDC refresh Z20-05, subject to conditions A, B, C, D, E, and F, except for the amendment to F that would allow FS6, FS7, and I'm sorry, you cut out after FS7, I think it was FSA, to allow them 36 feet and 3 stories, to not change that to 2 stories.
And we'll add in SFD, please. Thank you.
Yes, correct.
Can you say that and adding
And
to your
add
motion?
in FSD.
Perfect. We don't have an attorney in the room tonight, but it sounds, oh, online, good. So any thumbs up or objections from our attorney that's online? We're good with that. So we have a motion on the table. I'm not going to repeat it because I think it's already on record. So if somebody would like to second that motion, you can do so at this time.
I'll second that motion.
So we have a second of the motion. So at this time, I can take a vote. You can vote either way. So at this time, I'll do a roll call vote for the motion that's on the table as stated. So Commissioner Bigelow, how do you vote for this this motion? Yay or nay?
Yay.
And Commissioner Clausen, how do you vote for this this motion?
Yay.
Yay in favor. Commissioner Kendall, how do you vote for this motion?
Yay.
Perfect. And Commissioner Meehan, how do you vote for this motion?
Yay.
Perfect. And I, as chair, also commissioner, vote yay in approval of the motion that was brought forward on record. So with that, it carries forward unanimously. And with that, I thank you for your presentation. With that, I do not know. Let me see real quick what the next item is. So thank you again for your presentation. So with that, I guess we're about wrapping up. So communications, I guess it's time for communications. I don't have anything to report on. Is there any report online? Do we have our council member liaison Tilke online?
Yes, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the commissioners for taking the extra time tonight. These were really important topics and really appreciate your thoughtful questions and consideration as we move forward. This has been a long time project, but your comments were really right on, and appreciate that. I know Amy's ready to take it forward and get this baby checked off her list, but I wanted to give you just a couple of updates from the council that impact the downtown. Last night we heard the Brundrett building process for the rezone, and we continued that item until the second meeting in January to allow them to come back with a revise on their plans, and hoping that we can come together with some kind of collaborative effort to get that building moving. We also approved, and I know I wasn't here last month, so if I've shared this already, I apologize. Water Tower Plaza water treatment improvements. So they're doing work there, and so hopefully you'll see in the next few months that the water will be back on and all of the good things over there. Heritage District Utility Infrastructure Study was funded, and the Heritage District Intersection Study Traffic Congestion project was funded as well. You'll be hearing more of these as we go along, but I just wanted to let you know what the council had approved. And I think staff has some additional items other than that, but just wanted to share that news, and thank you again for your service.
Thank you. With that, are there any reports from other commissioners for current or future events? Hearing none. Okay. And then Amanda, our staff liaison, Amanda Elliott, any comments, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few points I want to make about the Heritage District and things that are happening. So the Paseo, which is listed as an essential public amenity in the redevelopment plan, it is a pedestrian and bicycle, so a car-free path from Elliott Road to Juniper Avenue. And yes, we have worked with Heritage North to have it all the way to Juniper. So we'll see that in their design review, but this is currently in pre-design. So this is the time in which we start examining the various elements of the Paseo and looking at the geometry of it and engineering and validating costs. And so part of the design process, we held a public meeting and then had a survey regarding the potential design options. And so the survey opened to the public on June 24th and it closed on July 16th. And during this time, we received over 1,100 survey responses. So we got a tremendous amount of feedback regarding some of these options for the Paseo. And of course, our feedback process isn't over yet. So we'll have additional in-person meetings to solicit feedback, and we're anticipating that this fall. In addition, on June 28th, we opened 5 new passenger loading zones. So these are areas where rideshare companies or private individuals may drop off people in the district. And so those open to the public. And according to Uber, as of August 7th or August 2nd, excuse me, there's been over 2,500 trips to the passenger loading zones. So they're being well utilized, and that's very exciting. We also, you may recall, we had previously put out a request for qualifications and proposals for the South Anchor. So that is the northwest corner of Gilbert and Elliott in the Heritage District Redevelopment Plan. And we did not come to consensus with the developer or come to terms. So we have a new RFP, or request for proposal, out for development. So this is a mixed use project really intended to bring some neighborhood services into the area. The site is approximately 2.1 acres, and it really serves as a gateway to the Heritage District, from the south. And that RFP is open until October 11th. And yeah, we expect a good turnout for that, and to see a mix of uses on that prominent and accessible corner. And certainly are looking to the developer to work with Lacey Track adjacent to it as we move forward with a developer, but that proposal process is underway. The pedestrian bridge, which you guys have been hearing about for a couple years, that is the bridge at Powerline Trail, which crosses over the UPRR at Neely. It's now open, and a ribbon cutting will be held on August 26th. The event begins at 6 p.m. and speeches commence at 6:30. So we would love to see you there. We also held an open house on August 12th for the townwide shade and streetscape master plan. So this plan is being developed really to create a healthier, more livable community, creates strategic investment and maintenance and growth for urban forests and engineered shade. Councilmember Tilke mentioned the 2 plans that were approved by council. So the first was the Heritage District Circulation Plan. This plan is really a long-range transportation plan and vision for the Heritage District, and it started with an intersection study that examined the capacities for each intersection, but really builds out to an overall need to look at circulation holistically. And that's not just traffic, that's not just car circulation. It's how do we move pedestrians, bicycles, micromobility, and really be able to look at that as a complete district. The second study was the infrastructure study for the utilities. So that study really provides a complete and comprehensive analysis of utilities that are in place, gaps and deficiencies in the Heritage District, and we'll also look at smart technology. So as you can understand, majority of this land was previously single family, and it's now moving to commercial. So we just want to ensure that all of the utilities, that we understand what the needs are as we continue to build in the district. And then Councilmember Tilke also mentioned, that there's work being done at the water tower that's to bring the current splash pad into code, county code. And so in speaking with Parks and Rec, that is anticipated for completion at the end of September. So
Great.
Those are my updates. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission.
Yeah. Thank you, commissioners. The shortest meeting of record is 6 minutes, and today's was 2 hours and like 8 minutes, I think. So with that, thank you for everyone's patience. This is why we're here. We serve selflessly, for the community. So thank you for your service, and staff. Great work. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. It is 8:11 p.m. Thank you, guys.